Not only had it been a terrible day, but it had also been one of those weeks when everything that could go wrong did. I had spent years establishing a reputation as a conscientious employee, but it was intolerable, only to be humiliated by my manager in front of my colleagues over a trivial misunderstanding. What should have been a simple conversation evolved into a public reprimand, his annoyance falling directly on my shoulders. I didn't argue or defend myself. I simply stood there, taking it all in, my jaw tensing, my teeth gritted. By the time I pulled into my driveway, all I wanted was a hot shower and some quiet, something to ease the pounding in my brain. But as I got closer, I noticed Tracy's car parked in my usual spot. My patience, already hanging by a thread, snapped as I gripped the steering wheel. I thought about honking, but why bother? Of course, my sister-in-law would stop by unannounced and park as if she owned the place. Too exhausted to engage in another pointless argument, I parked on the street. The crunch of gravel under my tires did little to ease my frustration. The house was dimly lit, and faint voices hummed from the kitchen. I took a deep breath and moved toward the sound, expecting Melissa to greet me with a simple, "Hey, how was your day?" Instead, I heard something that stopped me cold. Melissa's voice, as clear as day. "I simply don't love him anymore." Tracy let out a quiet laugh. "You knew this was coming?" "You were never over, Liam," Tracy continued, her tone almost amused. "You just settled for Jordan because he was stable, financially at least." The distant clinking of wine glasses was muffled by the pounding in my ears. I should have walked in and announced my presence, but some instinct told me to listen. "I've gotten back in touch with someone," Melissa admitted, her voice filled with excitement, "and I can see what I was missing. He's exciting, Tracy. He makes me feel alive." Tracy laughed. "So, what's the divorce plan?" I held my breath, my knuckles turning white as I clutched the doorway. Melissa didn't hesitate. "I want out." My stomach twisted. "I'll take what's mine," she continued, her voice firm. "And what's his? Did that mean—" "The courts always favor the woman in cases like this," she said casually. "Jordan has worked hard, sure. But legally, half of everything belongs to me. And he doesn't even have a prenup." Tracy whistled softly. "Damn, that's cold," Melissa chuckled. "Don't worry, Liam is successful. But why should I walk away empty-handed after all this time? I earned this. I was methodical. I was patient. My mind raced. The late nights she spent glued to her phone, the way she brushed me off when I tried to be affectionate, the cold distance I had chalked up to stress or boredom. She never loved me. I was never her partner. I was just convenient. A strange calm settled over me. I wasn't going to storm in and confront her. That would only make me a victim, a fool begging for answers I already had. No. I was going to beat her at her own game. Instead of grabbing my keys and slamming the door, I turned and walked away, leaving nothing behind but the first step in. A plan that would ensure she got exactly what she deserved. For hours, I drove aimlessly, replaying Melissa's words in my mind like a cursed mantra. "I settled for Jordan because he was stable." "I'll take what's mine." She had already decided. This marriage wasn't salvageable. And if she was going to play dirty, I had to act before she did. I parked in a deserted lot, resting my forehead against the steering wheel. 3 years of marriage built on deception. 3 years of me working tirelessly to build a future, thinking we were a team. I was nothing more than a financial safety net to her, and now she was trying to destroy my life and walk away with half of everything. Melissa had never contributed much to our lives together. After we married, she insisted on focusing on the house and starting a business. That business never came. Instead, she spent her days shopping, dining with her sister, and scrolling through social media, looking for new ways to complain about a life she did nothing to build. And yet, legally, she was entitled to my hard-earned money. The thought made me sick. Even after inheriting $25 million from my late father, I had been careful, living modestly. I never flaunted my wealth, never made a show of it. And now, if Melissa found out what I was really worth, she would fight for half of it. Unless I acted first. I straightened in my seat, my mind suddenly clear. I needed to disappear. I couldn't. Just withdraw everything overnight. That would raise too many red flags. I had to be methodical. Silent. That night I checked into a modest hotel under a false identity, paying in cash. I pulled out my laptop and started moving my investments. I didn't sell everything at once. That would be too obvious. Instead, I staggered the transfers, funneling assets into different accounts, some in my name, others under shell companies I had set up years ago. I emptied our joint account, leaving just enough for appearances. Just enough so Melissa wouldn't suspect anything. Yet. Step 2. Vanish without a trace. Melissa would notice. My absence soon, and if she got suspicious, she'd report me. I needed a plausible excuse, one that kept the police from getting involved. The next morning, I sent a casual message to my assistant. "Hey, I have to take a last-minute business trip. Investors need me out of town for a while." She asked if I needed a flight booked. "No, I've got it covered. If anyone asked, they'd assume I was just traveling." Step 3. Cut all ties. I left my phone behind, paid cash for a burner, canceled my credit cards, deleted my social media accounts. And then I sent an anonymous email to the police stating that I was leaving of my own free will. If Melissa tried to play the abandoned wife card, they wouldn't entertain it. By the time she woke up, the realization would hit. No money. No access to my funds. No idea where I was. And worst of all, Liam. Melissa had bet everything on him, thinking she could leave me and walk into a perfect life with her exciting new man. But Liam wouldn't save her. The moment he realized she was broke, he would disappear faster than I did. And as I crossed the state line, feeling lighter with every mile, I knew one thing for certain. I was free. For the first time in years, I had no obligations. No betrayals hanging over my shoulders. Just me, my freedom, and a world of possibilities. She rolled her eyes in surprise and grinned back, saying, "Just don't get in my way." For the first time since we met, I understood how much I liked this woman before turning and leaving. The unsettling feeling, until that morning, even though Charlotte continued to treat me like a stray, I had grown accustomed to living at Silver Creek Ranch. A dog that may strike at any time. But something didn't feel right today. It wasn't just the horse's restlessness or how the cattle continued to move uncomfortably. There was something more profound going on that I couldn't identify. Frank and Mar were in town for supplies, so Charlotte, Caleb, and I were left in charge. We had already completed my morning tasks, yet I kept hanging around the stables, looking out over the horizon as if I were waiting. I was waiting for something to happen. Then I saw the fence line. From where I was standing, I could see a portion of the distant pasture fence. It wasn't shattered, but it looked as though someone had loosened the wires. I scowled, picked up my hat, and made my way to where Charlotte and Caleb were repairing a water line. Caleb had gone to see how a sick colt was doing, so I went by myself. As I got closer, I sensed that this wasn't a coincidence. Hearing the distinct sound of voices, I reduced my speed and moved stealthily in the direction of the tree line. I noticed 2 men crouching close to the fence, rapidly expanding the gap, and my heartbeat quickened. Rustlers. Although I had heard Frank talk about cattle theft before, I never imagined that I would witness it personally. And now they were cutting their way into Silver Creek Ranch, right in front of me. One of them appeared to be Tyler. He worked for Howard Calloway, the owner of a competitor ranch, and I had seen him a few weeks prior at a rodeo event in town. Known for acting shadily, I ought to have gone straight for my phone and called Caleb, and then the sheriff. but I noticed a flash of movement close to the water. Someone else was there. My stomach plummeted when I recognized Charlotte. She had taken the narrow path, carrying her veterinary gear and heading down to the creek, probably to check on a wounded animal. She had no idea Tyler and his friend were only a few yards away, concealed in the brush. I didn't have time to think. I moved forward, and my boots struck the ground loudly enough for them to hear. Both men swung around, and Tyler's brows widened. When he saw me, "You must be the new ranch hand, Jordan," he said as he stood up. His friend laughed. "You're trespassing," I replied, my voice steady. "So what are you going to do? Stop us?" Tyler grinned. "I don't think you want to find out." "I believe I do," I shot back. Before he could move, I launched at him. I wasn't a warrior or a cowboy, but I had played football in high school. I knew how to tackle, quickly and forcefully. I gave Tyler my all, knocking him back. His buddy lunged in, but I was ready. I sidestepped his blow and threw one of my own, landing it clean on his jaw. The altercation didn't last long. Caleb arrived, with a shotgun in hand, more than enough to make them freeze. "Drop it," he growled. Tyler's friend hesitated until Caleb cocked the gun. The knife clattered to the ground. Charlotte emerged, her eyes wide as she took in the scene. I stood there, breathless, Tyler's blood smeared across my knuckles. Within 30 minutes, the sheriff arrived. Tyler and his partner were taken into custody. It turned out they had stolen from several ranches. Silver Creek was just their latest target. The man in charge, Howard Calloway, was arrested shortly after. Frank and Margaret returned just in time to hear the story. Frank gave me a pat on the back. "Seems like you're more than just a city boy, after all." But the most unexpected reaction came from Charlotte. She didn't say much at first, but that evening after supper, she found me at the barn. "You could have gotten yourself killed," she said softly. I met her gaze. "So could you." She shook her head. "You're a fool." But there was something different in her voice. Something softer. Respect. After that night, everything changed. Before, Charlotte had been aloof and distrustful, constantly waiting for me to screw up. But something shifted after the rustlers. She still tested me, still challenged me. But now, there was something else. Curiosity. She noticed me. And damn it, I noticed her too. It was subtle at first, the way she always seemed to be close by, even when she wasn't, the way her gaze lingered a little longer when I spoke, the way she'd brush past me in the barn, just close enough for me to feel her warmth. One afternoon, while I was repairing a broken gate near the stables, I sensed her watching. "You're always this quiet around me," she said, leaning against the fence. I wiped the sweat from my brow. "Depends on who I'm around," she smirked. I shrugged. "You talk enough for both of us." She chuckled, shaking her head. But there was something in her eyes, a glimmer of laughter.